Hi, I'm Christopher Carson, and this is my masterpiece, United in Service.
Wow, united in service it is.
Yep, we got the five major branches of the armed forces and the Coast Guard.
So the Navy and the Army
Mm-hmm.
and the Marines
Yep,
and the Air Force,
Air Force, and then you've got the Coast Guard.
Coast Guard.
Yeah. Now, the only
Well,
one that's not represented on this is the very newest one, which is still not completely formed, which is the Space Force. So,
I didn't even know that was happening.
yeah.
But Christopher,
Mm-hmm.
I have to tell you, I am so pleased that someone picked up on this theme for a clock because our military people,
Mm-hmm.
they're on the front lines. And in the last couple of years, with everything that's happened in the United States and the world, they've been on high alert, and we owe so much to them.
True.
So I'm so pleased that you have honored them in this way.
Well, when you told me the theme of reuniting America and reuniting us, the first thing I thought about was my military service. I served from 1993 to 1999, just between major conflicts, but still, it was the first time I was actually part of a real team, not just of the enlarged, military and the Air Force, which the branch I served in, but in a news team. I worked in AFRTS, which is the Armed Forces Radio and Television,
Okay.
and it was the first time I felt united. Um, so that's what first came back to me when you first mentioned the theme. And so I had asked you, has anybody done a military themed artwork? And nobody had. So I just went off with it. Now, I was going to try to do the emblems of each of the services, but I found that that was really difficult, especially with the medium that I work with. This is a mixed medium of basic acrylic paint and gel pen on this canvas piece. Um, but I found that there was just so much intricacy and you wouldn't necessarily know the difference between the emblems anyway.
Right.
That I thought it was probably more beneficial to use emblematic images of what the different services kind of represent. Or
You know, they can see those, perfect images
mm-hmm.
on pieces of paper or in brochures anywhere. But to see work like this,
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Well, like I said,
this
it
is
was
a
more
treat.
just to kind of emphasize what each of the branches kind of do. And so you've got the Raptor over here in the United States Air Force. Then you've got the tank over here in the Army. You've got an aircraft carrier up here in the Navy. And I tried to think of what was the most emblematic Marine Corps.
Iwo Jima.
Yeah, exactly. So I found this beautiful silhouette of the raising of the flag on Iwo Jima during World War II. And I thought that was most emblematic of the Marine Corps.
My father-in-law was in the Navy,
Mm-hmm.
and he came in after the Marines
Mm-hmm.
at Iwo Jima, and it was a really traumatic experience for him.
Oh, I bet. I bet.
He didn't like to talk about anything that had to do with that.
No.
But a few years ago, he was 93. There was a sign, a road sign between Alamogordo and Tularosa,
Mm-hmm.
and it had U.S. Marines on it, or U.S. Navy and Marines, and it was a billboard, but they put it too close to the ground, and it was grown over with weeds and debris. And he just one day just had a fit, and he said, by gosh, I'm correcting his language a little bit, we can't allow this to stay like this. And this was,
Well, it's
in the
disrespectful.
That's what he felt. It was
Yeah.
such a disrespectful thing. So I talked to my husband about it, and that night, after work, they got rakes and clippers and swords and went out there and they cut all that stuff down.
Mm-hmm.
And he ended up on the front page of the Alamogordo Daily News over it, and on the news up in Albuquerque.
Mm-hmm.
But the people that have served have been part of that team that you're talking about. In each of these military forces, it's here for them.
Yeah.
It's in their hearts.
Well, I know a lot of people don't necessarily consider the Coast Guard as, military service.
Oh, let me
but
tell you today.
They definitely are.
Absolutely.
Definitely are. And not only that, but they provide such a service, like in this image that I used, the rescue diver going in to save, somebody. That's, we don't always think about them as a saving unit.
Right.
We think of it more as a deterrent, our Coast Guard's out there trying to keep the bad guys out.
Right.
But they're also saving, poor people in distress. And so I wanted to include them and make them feel part of all of our services.
Well, Chris, were you born an artist, or did you develop into one?
I kind of developed into it. I always had an affinity with nature. Like to go out and fish and camp and things like that when I was growing up. I grew up in Utah, and there was a lot of beautiful country there.
Yes.
And I wasn't always included with everything, all the events going on in the state and groups of people. So I spent a lot of time outside reading and enjoying nature. I used to try to draw, but I wasn't very good at it. And but I was good at writing, and I was great at we're using cameras and such. And so I went into the Armed Forces Services as a broadcaster, so I could kind of utilize those skills with the idea of eventually going to school to become a filmmaker. And of course, while I was in there, I didn't quite do that. I just spent about 15 years in broadcast television. And it wasn't until I kind of came here to be closer to my parents from California, where I had been stationed and had worked for 9 years, or actually 6 years, with a year in between to go to school at the Armed Forces Radio and Television Center at the broadcast centers in Riverside, California.
Oh, wow.
But my family had relocated here my first year in the Air Force in '93, and I wanted to be close to my parents. So I came out here, started to go back to school, and I decided I was going to do a photography degree. And part of the degree plan was to actually do the drawings. And so I spent 2, drawing courses at the Hill here. Got my degree there, and just kind of been dabbling ever since, trying to increase my my abilities. But I am involved in the Otero Arts Inc.
I am so glad we're getting something up and rolling again. It's been years.
Yes, yes.
One time we had Desert Art League and Otero Arts Council, I think.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is kind of the offshoot of the Otero Arts Council. Chris Jones, who was part of that group, kind of came to the county and said, you've got this beautiful building. It's not, you're not renting it. Nobody's, you've done this beautiful remodel on it. Of course, that's our art space over, used to be the old women's building.
Yes.
And beautifully redone. And it wasn't doing anything. It was just kind of sitting at the moment.
I think it's wonderful.
So he
that
had
that
this
building
idea,
is-
and I signed right up with him. That was about 3 years ago, maybe almost 4 now.
It's been a long time, but I spent some years working with the ladies that were the original founders of the Women's Club. They talk about, do you know how they raised money?
Mm-mm.
They sold cemetery plots.
Really?
Yep, that's how they raised the money. That's how they did it.
Well, I guess it helps if you have land to do so.
And they would absolutely love what you're doing.
Oh, it's just such a beautiful building, and the biggest thing
is.
is we want it to be seen, and we want it to be used, and so
Yes.
we've got all kinds of great ideas that we're trying to work on. We've got an art show that's coming up. Start soon. It's first going to be virtual, so you can see it on online on
Right.
Facebook, and then we're actually going to have an art sale and show in December at the art space. And
Super.
meanwhile, we're trying to put together courses and things that, like I'm planning on. I did a dollhouse recently, and we're trying to put together a woodworking type of course, maybe building
Oh, great.
dollhouses, things like that. trying to set up a movie night, a screening night, so that you can play some of the older films and have some film appreciation. Talk about the history of cinema, because that's kind of where I came from. Like I said, I wanted to be a filmmaker, did art.
You're still going to be a filmmaker.
I probably will.
Christopher, I want to thank you for doing this for CAPT and for the stress reduction programs and services we're going to provide. I really appreciate it, and this truly says it's time to reunite us as people and a country.
I fully believe that.
Thank you.